Hello friends, once more I am Rob of Lair of OmnusI, and this is the 8th day of the RPGaDay 2019 as posted by the RPG Brigade Facebook. The topic for today is obscure, and I thought it would be a nice thing to kind of talk about this hobby of ours and the interesting little paths that it's taken. Of course, every game designer who puts out a game generally hopes that as many people who can will love his game, buy the game, make them some money. That's part of the reason why we do this, and that this game will kind of perpetuate itself. It'll make a certain amount of fame and profit that you can then take and continue to develop your game. There is kind of a social Darwinism, though, that takes place in the hobby. Some games hit it off like magic. They just strike a chord. They get a group that just gets passionate about the game. There are a number of games that, from the content or from the regionality or whatever, I would kind of expect to dwindle into obscurity, but they've escaped because, again, loud, passionate fan base and support. Some of these games are, possibly seem outdated to modern gamers' taste, but there's still a large contingent of people who support and back them. Even though, you have games like, Pathfinder coming out in the 2nd edition, 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons coming out, a game like Adventurers Conquerors Kings can put out a new edition and immediately get backed because they aren't obscure, because they have a large group of followers who are just eagerly waiting to back a new version of it, which is awesome if you can get that. That's created pocket celebrities in our hobby. There are certainly people who have been riding on their notoriety or reputation because they have struck that chord. For every one game like that, however, there are well over 100 that have failed, that have come out, trotted their little time in front of a few people, never caught fire, and then just kind of died. Or they become a love project where the person will continue to put work into it, although it never seems to get outside of a very, very tiny niche. Sometimes inside of the town that it spawned out of. Occasionally you'll get something that looked like it could have done well, but just doesn't, and that's what I'm going to bring before you today. A little something from my collection. Back in the 90s, I was into pro wrestling, and several people have taken a bite at the pro wrestling apple, even with the backing of major federations. These things don't tend to do all that well. There is only so many people who intersect in the giant Venn diagram of people who love role-playing games and people who love pro wrestling. The combat is always something that's kind of exciting. It's modern gladiatorial combat, but it's just something that out of the people who fit in between both of those spheres. And then people who can find out about a particular game and get eager to support it, it's just rare. Historically, it hasn't been all that huge. I myself have a few of these kind of games, but the one I'm going to bring out is one that I thought, when it came out, had the best chance of trotting out and really doing something, and it never did. That is Wit Publications' WWF adventure game. Yes, WWF, back in the day before they were the WWE, before the World Wildlife Federation took the World Wildlife Foundation took them to court and took the name, took the abbreviation, and the owner, Vince McMahon, had to change the name. It was the WWF, and as this is kind of encapsulated in time. The game itself had some very interesting dynamics. One of the things that I think it did better than any of the other pro wrestling games that I have is represent the logic of a wrestling match, the story that you can tell through a wrestling match, how you have heroes and you have villains, you have the faces and you have the heels, and the baby faces start out as the as the ones most likely to win. They are noble, they are competent. And then the villains cheat, take control, punish the babyface, wear them down, and then the babyface has a chance to make a comeback and try to score, the win, overcoming the villain. It's kind of the story that most people come to expect in everything. It's a microcosm of the hero's journey of a way. The babyface comes into the match, open expectations, thinking, test his strength or lock up to open up the match. Adversity comes, the villain cheats in some way, punches him cold or rakes the eyes or does something. And then the hero goes through trials and tribulations, and eventually there's a series of comebacks, peaks, and where the audience gets their hope up that this hero is going to defeat the villain, and the villain, if he's good, snatches that away from the fans and gets another one over on the baby face and continues to punish him until the climax, where he makes his big comeback and can eventually put away the villain and win. Wrestling matches kind of follow that logic, or at least they used to. These days, it's kind of gotten strange. I think a large part of the reason why the wrestling world is kind of on the ropes. Yeah, I know there's a new wrestling league forming, All Elite Wrestling, and there's things that are still going on in wrestling, but in a large part, not nearly the number of people go to wrestling as they used to and really support it. It used to be much, much bigger, I remember. So a big part of that is because they lost their talent for telling the story in the ring. Now it's all about writing and promos, and it's not as much about the real engaging part of pro wrestling, which is watching this story take place in the ring. This game does a really good job of doing that. It creates a desperation cycle. As you get worn down, your statistics drop, which decreases your chance of being able to come back and do cool things in the ring. There's a long list of maneuvers. Quite a decent list, not certainly exhaustive, but it has maneuvers at different levels. So as you wear down your opponent, you're able to do new and cooler things. And it's all broken down to nice charts and tables, which was cool. The game had a couple of sample wrestlers to kind of demonstrate, although these were really good wrestlers. These are the superstars of the age, like, Randy Macho Man Savage, or Razor Ramon, Bret Hart, Lex Luger, Yokozuna, The Undertaker, the Steiners. These were the sample wrestlers that were in this book. And they had advantages. They had your statistics, so you could focus on one area. Most wrestlers do, generally. If you have a really strong wrestler, it's going to be pretty obvious. Your character is going to look huge. If you're a great technician, you'll get a reputation for that, and opponents then, tactically, and there's some good tactics in here if you want to win often, is keeping the match away from what your opponent does really well, unless that's also what you do really well, in which case then it's going to see who's going to be the strongest or the most technically sound wrestler or what have you. It's an interesting system. Now, other role-playing games involving pro wrestling try to focus more on quick action and quick resolution. This game is definitely more tactical. The matches do take a while. Sometimes if your character really concentrates and gets their constitution and stamina up, they can have a lot of hit points to wear down, and they may... Actually, there's two differences, the constitution and stamina. Your constitution determines how many hit points you have, how long you can stay on your feet. Your stamina determines how quickly you drop in from one level to another. There's 4 levels. If you're down to level 4, you are gassed. You are in real trouble and in real danger of being pinned, as your stats are as low as they can get. But there's always the chance. It's a percentile roll, and sometimes you have to risk it all on a single die roll. Interesting thing about how all of the interplay works is that, everything that you can do in a move, you can chain together. Say, for example, you can Just stand right in front of somebody and clothesline them. Hit them with a straight arm, your arm across their chest or in their face if you want to go for a lariat, and try to knock them to the ground. If you are running, you have more impact, therefore you do an extra die of damage. If you climb onto the first turnbuckle and leap off and clothesline a person, that does more damage. If you go to the top turnbuckle and leap off, that does even more damage. With the added problem that if you miss, you're going to take damage as you fall. If you take a length of chain and wrap it around your arm and then clothesline them, you add the damage from the chain to your clothesline. So, you could really set up some wicked multipliers. And if your finishing maneuver was a clothesline, you would double the base damage of the clothesline itself before you add anything else. So you could get devastating strikes into the match, and you probably should. A clean wrestler is going to take a little bit longer to beat a heel, but if a heel can get the referee's attention away from him and cheat, you can really wear down somebody in a hurry. There were interviews that you could do to help boost your notoriety. There were several levels of notoriety, both to the good and to the bad, which gave you more bonuses. If you were just slightly notorious, that would mean that you could get a cheat and steal control of the match at some convenient time for you. If you were a hero and you had a small amount of notoriety, you could get comebacks, which would allow you to take control of the match when the villain has it. Basically stealing the initiative. Otherwise, the system was relatively simple. If you have the initiative, you continue to have the initiative until either you take damage yourself because you miss with something, or you miss and your opponent hits you. So, yeah, it was an interesting enough system. However, why is it obscure? It didn't sell very well. I do remember seeing it was advertised in the trades and in magazines and the like. I had my game store get me a copy, which they did, and they got a couple extras. But I don't think this thing got out very often. I think it was mostly through direct order that people were able to get a hold of this game. It did not look distributed. I've never seen it in any other store, and I had to specially ask for it. So perhaps the distribution on it was borked and it never had a chance. I really don't know. I've tried to do research and find out information about this game, and there really hasn't been a lot. When I got this one myself, I paid $17 for this game. It, for a role-playing game, back in the day, in the 90s, it wasn't too bad. But the sad thing about it is that in the back of the book, they have a miniatures line with the different pro wrestlers in pewter. They had two other books that they had advertised, the World Wrestling Federation Advanced Source Book and the World Wrestling Federation Adventure Game Maneuver Handbook. Both promising expansions on the game that would have been cool. More emphasis on tag team wrestling and counter maneuvers and chain combinations for the advanced book, which never came out. The expanding on the number of moves could have been really cool. The ones that are there are certainly serviceable, and they're the ones that you see all the time in wrestling matches, but as time has gone on, more moves have come out, and there's always been a wide variety of different things, especially as you go region to region. These are very much towards the WWF side, so a lot of the crazy things that they were doing in Japan, Mexico, real hotbeds of wrestling, they don't have a lot of the maneuvers that you would more commonly see in those places. So, yeah, it's a neat little game, neat little part of history, quite obscure. Very few people know of this game. I've talked to pro wrestling fans who are gamers, and they're like, I've never heard of this game. It's a good reason for it. So that's my little bit of obscurity I thought I would bring into the light for you, and I hope you enjoyed it. I do intend on my Lair of OmnusI channel, I have an Omnus Critic video coming out that will break down the strengths and weaknesses of the game. And I will probably do a character witness at some time showing off how these characters are made. I do think that there was some missed opportunities in this game. I think it could have been really something special. But that's how the gaming hobby goes. If you don't strike lightning, it's not going to go well for you oftentimes. And of course, with something licensed, you always have to worry if the company is going to take their license back, which is almost certainly what happened to Wit. So, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining me in this, and hopefully you stop by and see me again the next RPG a Day topic tomorrow. Thank you, and farewell.